Erik, I tried to speak to Sid about this, and I totally fumbled the question as I normally do. But in terms of on the subject of work life balance, I wondered what your take on it is, given that you also come from a relatively I don't know what the right word is, but socialist is maybe not the right word, but
communist background in Norway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of in a way is, I mean, I don't know. I lived in Sweden for a year, and it's like, on the one hand, it's like fucking crazy liberal and really forward thinking, but those ideals sometimes, they kind of get forced onto you, and then it's like, well, hang on a second, this is kind of counterintuitive to what the original intention was, and it's so what I was going to ask you was and in no hate towards Sweden at all, we wanted to go back, we loved it, we got a lot of great friends out there, but on the subject of work-life balance, from my understanding, America and even California to an extent is probably quite similar to what I grew up with in South Africa. It's kind of like, you are working, your contract is 40 hours a week, but you're probably working minimum 45, maybe even 50, and not getting paid overtime. And the point being is that generally everybody work really hard, but they play hard as well, and that kind of instills a different kind of not meaning that people are drunk all the time, but I mean, even if you have worked till 10 o'clock on a Friday night, Saturday morning you're hitting the beach, you're going for a surf, in the afternoon you might go around to friends for a barbecue, Sunday morning you'll go for a fucking beautiful hike up in the mountains, and those 2 days you feel like you've really disconnected. Whereas in Europe, it's kind of like you're working less. You've on paper, you've got a better work-life balance. But fuck me, I can have 3 days off, and around here, it's like I struggle sometimes to switch off because you're not really doing anything substantial on the weekend. Can you talk to me a little bit about what your experience is of that and what your take on it is?
Well, I think I very much agree with you on a lot of the stuff you're saying, and just comparing it to like Norway, I think Norway and Sweden are a bit different, and of course, as a Norwegian, we always love to hate on Sweden, but in the end, it's very, very similar. And like there, you usually work from 8 to 4, and once it hits 4 o'clock, that's you go out and then you go in, you go in the forest, you go skiing, you do something. It's very much about what you do outside of work. And I don't know, it's very different here, I think, and it is. If you look at it from like on a numbers point of view, like just you definitely have a worse work-life balance here. Just from my experience, the places I've been, you do more hours, you don't necessarily get paid for it, but it is it's kind of like just a different. It's a very different culture, but it's also like the work environment is more like you kind of do things together, and you kind of get, I wouldn't say, you kind of get manipulated in a way, whereas you feel like you're not working that much as you would be in Europe maybe. So because of like as you said, the things you have, and you have like, especially I think California, you have like in LA in general, you have access to so much cool stuff around you with nature and just like experiences. So when you have time off, you usually just, you go all in and you just take that time off. So yeah, and then you reset and you get back to it. And it's also very much, I think the days can get dissected, whereas you do work in the morning, then you go off, you do something, maybe you have a long lunch, whatever, you do an activity, and then you get back in the evening kind of refreshed, or whatever you want to call it, and then you work till midnight that day, or it really depends. But
is that kind of like part of the, like, does that fit into the office day sort of thing? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I don't know, the previous places I worked here in LA were I think those were among the studios in California that have the best balance, whereas it was more like a European setup. And I think especially Honda, it's It's definitely not doing more hours there than you would be doing in Europe. But my current situation is definitely on the heavier side than what it was before. So,
but that's kind of startup land, though, right? I mean, that's the kind of mindset.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these, especially the automotive startups and companies around here, kind of have that, have a little bit of that culture, which it just is what it is, and yeah.
I had this. This is a terrible example, but there used to be this program called American Hot Rod with Boyd Coddington. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I don't think I have.
Like he was like, you know, it was back in the days of like Pimp My Ride and whatnot. And he was like this legend hot rod builder, and it would always be the same thing, right? They would get down to the deadline, and like, you know, one guy in the studio had like booked you know, a weekend of wakeboarding with his homeboys, and then it would get to like Friday night, and they'd be like, so guys, you coming in on Saturday and Sunday because we need to get this build ready for Monday, you know? And then the camera would pan onto the guy that's booked this trip with his friend. and at first you'd be like, oh, I'm going, I booked this thing, and then eventually they go like, oh, that's cool, you know, it's okay, you know, you can go and do this, but like all your friends are going to be working. You realize that, you know, is that kind of manipulation.
Yeah, but I don't know. I've seen that.
It's an extreme version of what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I've seen that kind of stuff in as an intern in Europe too. Like, whereas like one guy was doing, I'm not going to name like companies or nothing here, but I was like just fly on the wall, kind of like, oh fuck, that's, you know, messed up. So there's one guy I was doing this car project, and it's a pretty serious project. And then he's like, yeah, okay, you know, I got 2 weeks vacation up, you know, coming up, and wherever he was going, you know, south of Europe somewhere. And then came back, and, you know, just came back to his desk and like, yeah, all right, this other guy just got your, you know, whatever production program, and, you know, he's doing it now, and, you know, all that. And like, it was just, he had no like pre-warning about what was going to go down, you know. And I was just like watching it, I'm like, oh shit, that's pretty savage, you know. But that's just, you know, so I think wherever you go, you'll have some of that. But yeah,
dude, you know, that's a really interesting situation, because like on the one hand, I have to say, like, my mindset beforehand would have been like, you know, if you want to fucking get this car, like in that situation, like if you want this production program and you want to see your design through, and you know that there's this crucial gateway coming up, then, you know, you should not sacrifice your holiday entirely. But if you've known for a while, then maybe, you know, postpone that, or have like, you know, talk to your manager beforehand and say, listen, Frank, I really want to go to, I've got this holiday, this trip planned, but, you know, this program's really important to me. How do we work these two things out? But at the same time, I've never seen that, I mean, not out in the open anyway, that happen over here. Like, I've always seen like some designer going like, oh yeah, I've started this now, and you know, we're going away next week, so I'm not going to be in for, you know, the next 3 weeks. And I always, like, it used to anger me in the beginning, because I'm like, how the fuck can you just like be so blasé about it? You know, so many people would kill to be in this position. But I don't know, you know, in the example you've just used, on the one hand, it's like, you know, it's a really harsh repercussion of your actions. But at the same time, it's like you were able to go off and go on your holiday and switch off. So, you know, somebody's got to do it.
Oh, I totally agree with like the first part of what you were saying, and in terms of like, it's how you go on about it, and like you just gotta like, you just gotta adjust to it, I think, and then realize, you know, what the situation is, and not just be totally oblivious of it, and, you know, come back and, you know, like be all shocked. I definitely think I totally agree with that. So yeah.
You relatively new to the tech space now, Erik? Like but I guess you kind of getting a feel for what that might be like. Mm-hmm. Can you, in very general terms, I don't want you to talk about company specific stuff, but I mean, like, could you talk a little bit about some of the differences between those two environments?
Yeah. So, and just from my experience right now, which is like, I guess it's like 4 or 5 months, but it's very efficient compared to a normal car OEM, and that's a massive relief. Honestly, it's just like a removal of a lot of layers. So I've been kind of in the beginning, it's just like, oh, decision making happens this quick, and I'd be like, oh, you don't need a second, third, fourth, and several layers of opinions on this for this to actually go ahead and be okay. So we're doing this. That's very, very refreshing, I gotta say. And then I think it's also a little bit, as we're like, it's starting up and it's still a relatively small company, I find myself being probably more of a potato, doing a lot of different things, not necessarily just like exterior design work, which primarily has been my kind of, well, I guess forte or like thing to do. And I also find that really refreshing. So because I'm generally like interested in a lot of things, and that kind of gives a little outlet for that. And I think also it's made me realize a little bit how, like, I think car design in general it's amazing, and there is an insane amount of talent. Like, but I'd say it's a lot of that talent is probably a little bit wasted as well and suppressed. And I think just stepping out from like car design a little bit has made me realize that. Just getting a little bit of perspective and seeing how things run outside of it. So yeah,
that's a really important thing to maybe elaborate on. When like some kid goes, well, I that they might see a production car on the road and go like, this company fucking. They need to their designers. We need to have a word with their designers, and it's like, you have no fucking idea.
Yeah,
like,
that's some bullshit,
That is total fucking bullshit. But people don't realize that. They don't realize like how big the teams are and how much awesome shit just kind of ends up in the cutting room floor because. The committee of marketers or accountants or maybe even like managers in the design team have decided actually what Johnny in the corner is doing looks really cool, but it doesn't fit the brand or whatever the case is. There's some absolute insanity in terms of like amounts of talent and real skill in I think every single place I've worked in actually.
Yeah. Likewise, I spent some years here in LA at General Motors, and just the amount of like talent and the amazing work that you see throughout that company and the amount of designers, it's just insane. And then you kind of start thinking like, okay, where do I fit into all of this? And yeah, it's a very kind of slow and big structure, but yeah, it just shows how complex a large company like that is. And I think also like the design field or for transportation design is changing so much, the processes and the opportunities, and I think as a young student coming in, I think I'd probably think twice about like that kind of this textbook route of like getting an OEM car design job, smashing out 8 sedans, becoming a manager, and then your director. I think that's probably becoming a lot tougher now than maybe what it was, like kind of keeping a straight line like that. But I think there's like so much opportunity in terms of kind of branching out, doing different things. And I think it's also now, as opposed to before, I think you're kind of able to like, okay, you can take a left, but then you can jump back in again, and that's not like seen upon as impossible. Because even just 5-6 years ago, I felt like people were always saying like, oh yeah, you start doing interior, you're definitely not ever going to be doing exterior again. But that's for sure not the case. And I think people are so much more open-minded now, and the different sectors within transportation that's kind of opening up, and the connection with like tech in general, and it's so many amazing opportunities, I think. So I think twice about like or just have an open mind as a student coming in terms of what you want to do. Because for me, like, I never doing what I'm doing now, I never envisioned that. I never wanted that 5-6 years ago, but I do want to do what I'm doing right now. So, yeah.
What are the really good things that you would say you learn in that kind of, you know, traditional OEM environment?
I think it's just it comes down to that to the insane amount of talent that just exists within these car companies, and just like so many people that are better than you at so many things, and just really, it's very daunting to an extent. You get a little bit like, oh shit, you know, you kind of start thinking maybe that you're a bit of a fraud, or like, you know, how are you gonna able to keep this job? But I don't know. It's as long as you're employed, you know, just take that opportunity and you know, learn and learn from these guys and just like observe. And I think it's an amazing place just to gain knowledge and get better at what you do. I think in general, that's probably the for me, the number one thing. Just observe.
I agree, and I think that you know, I think especially in terms of craft, you know, where there's so many people that you don't even know exist, you know, guys in the shadows that, you know, have done, you know, contributed immense amount to a certain car that you idolize, but, you know, somebody else has maybe presented it. And there are these guys and girls in the shadows that are just like absolutely incredible at, you know, whether it be at, you know, at sketching or just like rendering or realizing a volume really quickly. It's kind of a luxury to be in that environment, you know, to soak up all that stuff, especially in the early days. And I think that like I really like what you're saying with regards to having an open mind with how things evolve and where you can go to in the future. I think there's like a lot to be said for learning, like cutting your teeth in that environment and learning the business and learning your craft in that environment. You know, there's so many different things that you can learn, but at the same time, the negative part to that is that you get caught up in all the bureaucracy or the temptation to chase the kind of company car and the pension and, you know, eventually the chance at having the title manager behind your name or director or chief.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure.
I interned at a startup before it was kind of a buzzword, and a long time ago in 2008, and I absolutely loved it. But, you know, again, to if I go back to what I was just saying, I mean, I think that there's a lot that I wouldn't have learned had I not spent time in a traditional OEM. I'm definitely like kind of, you know, sick of traditional OEM life, but I learned a hell of a lot in that environment, and I think that it's I'm taking over your answer now, so I should probably shut up.
No, that's all good.
Erik, how do you deal with the like 10 days holiday that you guys get in America? Like, how do you?
Well, luckily now it's a little bit better of more of a European setup that I have now, so haven't really gotten to experience that yet. But if you take days off, you just got to take because I've been contracting the whole time over here. You just get you just don't get paid, but it's not an issue like getting vacation. It's just that it's unpaid basically. So or it has been for me so far in my situations. You know, I don't know. It's a lot of different setups you can get, but so yeah, total. I don't know. For me, it's not been an issue dealing with that, and I do feel like coming from like a grim, cold Norway, I feel like every day is more of a vacation here than, you know, what it would be over there. So I don't know. I'm not complaining about it. So
yeah, I think that's one thing as well. Like the last time I was home, I was speaking to a guy that is like spends a lot of time in Europe as well, and he just said, you know, the thing that ultimately drew him back to South Africa is like, despite the shitty economy and harder work and less money, it does kind of, even when you're working, you kind of feel like you are on vacation, so I guess that makes you less, it makes you crave a all-inclusive package to Spain a lot less. So, yeah.
Well, for sure.
I think I've kind of picked your brains for as much as I can, Erik. Are you playing around in VR a lot?
I actually am, but I use Gravity Sketch quite a bit actually, but just on the low. I see people doing amazing stuff, like really progressive, like making surfaces and everything and complete models and that, but I'm not to that extent. But because I feel like I'm fairly efficient in Alias and like polygonal softwares. But what I do is I plug that. I have like a headset and I have Gravity Sketch set up. So I quite often when I do projects, I do the initial just like proportion model, just like line work to get a feeling in and they're all wobbly and shitty and all over the place. But somehow it gives you like it's very expressive, the gesture. So even like I think you mentioned that like wedge thing that I did initially here. That thing was initially a VR string model basically, and I do that with a lot of projects. Just like create the initial like just a 5-minute doodle, and then I just export that into Alias or whatever 3D software, and then off you go.
When you say like expressive, I mean, do you is it? I mean, I know that the gestures and everything can be quite expressive, but I mean, at the end of the day, lines at some point need to be controlled, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then so whatever you end up doing there, you've got to re-import into Alias, and you'll end up or whatever software that it is that you're using. But do you feel it's beneficial in terms of how you might experience the cabin, for example, or are you not really thinking about that?
I'm not thinking about that at all. I'm just like trying to find because the thing about it, it's totally uncontrolled, and you can like really read into it, and the way at least that's the only way I use it. It's very primitive the way I use it, but at least it gives me a notion, and it's 3D. It's a spinnable object. If it's a car, I might import just like wheels and then sketch around that. Extend, shorten the wheelbase, these kind of things.
But sorry, are we talking about Gravity Sketch now?
Yeah, this is Gravity Sketch. Yeah, okay. And then it just gives me an initial like. And it's not like that's what I hate about like just going into Photoshop or something like that, spending a lot of time on that. I think my hats off to the people making like amazing like sketches and illustrations and renderings in Photoshop. I think that's amazing. But it's just for me it's dead. It's like once you've done and you're like put all the gloss and shine on that, and it's just like locked into one view. So I do really appreciate the fact that like a Gravity Sketch, like or other softwares. Alias even has the same setup now. I just don't think it's there yet. It just gives you the 3D object. You can move around it, like observe it, and like like really get a feel for what it is or what it isn't, and what it should be. So yeah.
What are your views on somebody that's not versed in 3D at all, starting out or thinking that they need to learn in something like Gravity Sketch, for example?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question, because I already knew 3D before I came into it, and it's
but what is your opinion with regards to, I mean, do you feel that it's more important to familiarize yourself with 3D in a computer first, or?
I think maybe just because I think things are changing so fast, and we're probably not going to be sitting and watching things on doing 3D stuff on a 2D screen in the future. I don't know, the 15 years down the line, but for now, obviously whatever workplace wherever you go in terms of equipment, all that, that's still kind of the norm. So I think I'd still want to kind of get into working the conventional way. But hey, I think honestly, I think just being open-minded in general, whatever medium process, how you want to express yourself and how you can get what's in your head, like just out. I think that's however you want to do it. I think that's up to you to kind of find what's efficient for you. And I think for me, that comes down to me starting out too, always getting criticized because I wasn't necessarily sketching and I was doing 3D. And yeah, I think it's just progressing, and I think however you can express yourself, I think that's just go for it, experiment and just find your way.
I'm sorry to fucking ask about this again, Erik.
No, go ahead.
No, on the subject of sketching, like we're at times where, I mean, now you've obviously got to stage now where you don't really need to blast out 100 sketches, but how did you convince a boss or win a theme or get other people on board with your ideas when you were maybe not sketching all that much?
Well, I think up until the last few months, I've always, I've sketched a lot and I've done a lot of Photoshop and these things, but if within the time you have, basically, let's say you have a week or 2 weeks to whatever do, for a presentation, presenting whatever concept or ideas for whatever project it is, and you can manage to have a fully working 3D model that makes kind of sense, and you can showcase that in some way, even just spin the model, people will be like, oh shit, it's and if it's just not shit, people will be like, oh, that's kind of cool, or that works, and how about we just mill that right away as a scale model? It's it definitely is it's an advantage, and I do see generally that like it's just becoming so much more 3D in whatever workplace I've been. So I think it's just the fact that for good and bad, it's just more of a tangible thing, because it's one step closer to reality.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely has its cons, but I think for people that are making decisions, they'll be like, oh, they just see that extra hint of reality, and then they will be like, yeah, well, it's already there, just go ahead, go ahead, let's do it. So
yeah. In that regard, do you see like sketching become less and less prevalent?
I kind of hope not, but because I think it's just such an important part, but it's more of like a initiation thinking part. But I do think it's, as a presentation tool, I do think it's becoming less and less efficient, maybe. So with just the way the tools and everything are progressing, like a powerhouse like Blender, who has like everything, like it's an all-in-one software. I think so, because, and that's just, I think it's just based on basically decision makers having just more information, more visual information.
Well, there's it's you with the model, as you said, there's nothing to interpret. It's there. The volume is there.
Yeah, to some extent, but I think also you can keep it loose, and there can be a lot of interpretation and like kind of, what can I say, like questionable areas, especially when you have like designers like myself doing modeling,
like flying surfaces everywhere.
There's a lot of dirty, dodgy stuff flying around, but and sometimes that's also equally as like, I think, expressive or mysterious as maybe a sketch that doesn't make sense. So yeah.
What's going to be interesting to see is like what the portfolio will evolve into in let's say 10 years time, or even 5 years time for that matter. Like how like, because like sketching is not necessary. Sketching is not going to go anywhere, and it's always going to be, to some degree, as you said, an integral part to the whole process, because there's nothing faster than putting lines on a piece of paper.
It's how you think, it's
but then it's also absolutely. But the thing is, the tricky thing is then, like, and it's coming up more and more now, is like where students kind of feel overwhelmed with like, what the fuck should I be focusing on? Because like to get good, like if you can't sketch properly, to get to an acceptable level, just sketching takes quite a lot of time, you know, to really get good at it. And then it's like, you know, do I put all my time into that? Do I put a little bit of time into that and a little bit of time into 3D, a little bit of time into rendering? It's I have to say I'm not really envious, you know. I think it's there's a lot of pressure with regards to what's expected of you now.
I agree, totally agree. But I think then it's up to you to kind of like analyze and kind of know yourself, and of course experiment. And then you can kind of, I think if you experiment in different mediums and different ways of doing things, you kind of get a notion of what you're shit at and like what you might be better at, I think. Or if you should like, you know, leave the design field, you know, as a whole, maybe, you know. But yeah, and that was definitely my case where I was like, you know, because I remember like way back to like that getting that exchange year at Coventry. I sat down, I did some I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna sketch some cars now, you know. And I did, and I was looking at it, I was like, yeah, this, you know, I'm creating some pretty damn good sketches right here, yeah. And I can share you those. I still have them on Dropbox. And
dude, yeah, please. I know that honestly, that if you be like okay with that,
I am.
That would be like really, really powerful.
And when I did those sketches, I was 22, like 22, 23 years old, you know, just like about to do that exchange year. And so that's pretty late. And it was, and I let them lay on the counter for a day, came back to them, had a look at them, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst fucking sketches I've ever seen. And that's when I kind of had a little bit of a realization, like, yeah, obviously it's going to take a lot of work to up that level, but you know, I'm already fairly decent at doing some like engineering modeling and, you know, CATIA and these things. And once you've seen CATIA, you know, you get to the alias interface, that's a dream, you know. And then that's kind of how it started, me being very like, it's just a different way of expressing oneself, I think. And yeah,
dude, it's I mean, yeah, I think experimentation with everything is definitely key. But it's like, that doesn't make it any less overwhelming, you know, because there's just so many things. Right? I mean, even if it was just 3D, like you've got Alias and now you've got Blender and you've got Maya and you've got all these different things. But maybe, I mean, from my point of view, if somebody was asking me, if you like just from a 3D aspect, I would say that for the most part, most of the studios nowadays are pretty open-minded to you using everything, especially as a designer. You can use whatever the fuck you want because you're not actually necessarily responsible for quote-unquote surfacing. And therefore, you know, find the tool that works for you and, you know, double down on that. You know, you don't have to be an expert at everything. It's, as you said, it's about communicating what's inside here onto something, whether it be on paper or on screen or whatever, to other people, you know, communicating your ideas and developing a workflow that kind of works for you. I guess, Erik, I think we're probably, you know, on that note, probably wrap things up with, you know, the usual of what you would advise young people starting out today with.
I feel like I've kind of answered that question like a couple of times, or like,
okay,
a little bit. But,
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know, like if I
can
anything.
Anything. I mean, it could be with mindset as well. If it doesn't have to be that practical, if you're big into that. If not, I don't know. Maybe from your point of view of changing lanes, that might be an interesting angle to come at it. You know, kind of getting into the business a bit more late and you know, going from engineering into design when people might look at you a bit strange. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's definitely never too late to, I don't know, starting earlier is probably better, but it's never too late to kind of like change lanes and do something different. And man, I had so many doubts about like doing this and kind of going from like a safe, well-paid engineering job in Norway kind of, and then just doing this. And which is like the most uncertain thing in the world. It felt like to me, especially starting out. And just like if you're passionate about it, just this is pretty lame kind of ending here, but just freaking go for it, And definitely getting the blonde girl impression in right there, but
no, that's absolutely, yeah.
I don't know. I felt like I kind of answered that a couple of times.
Sorry, it's my fault as well for kind of, I could have maybe not put you on the spot like that. So it's my fault as well. Don't worry.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Erik, thank you very much, dude. I really enjoyed your time. I really enjoyed speaking to you as well. I really, really like your stuff, and it's always, as I say to quite a few of the guests, it's so interesting to actually meet people. I mean, even if it's virtually, to kind of you see someone's picture and you see their work, and you could be the most open-minded person in the world, but you kind of, your brain subconsciously starts painting a picture of what that person is, or how they sound, or and it's always I'm always shocked by it. I'm always surprised by this, and it's it's enjoyable for me. I hope it was for you. I'm fucking guaranteed there's going to be quite a few people that are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you so much.
I hope so. Thanks for having me on. It's been super cool.
Cool.